there'll be so much talk about trade deals between the US and China. Trump administration has moved on from Canada now. He was dealing with a bigger fish, which is China. And there's been a lot of talks on how it's going to affect the consumers worldwide and in America in particular, and somewhat in Canada too. So in a way, we are affected by this indirectly. But so on the 2nd of April was the Liberation Day, as Trump termed it, and that was the day he set tariffs um, on many countries around the world. Some on Cameroon, some on Nigeria, some on Canada, not in Canada this time. Some in other countries around the world. But one that was worth noting was that on China, which was levied 145% tariff. So if you had anything that you're buying for $2, the price went up almost more than double. Okay, so
Mhm.
you're paying almost $4.50 after that. So
Mhm.
that was a huge thing, and there's a lot of reaction around the world. Stock markets dropped significantly, and now we're just beginning to see some effects, some rebound effects. Again, Asang, maybe I'll start with you. What was your thought on? I mean, it's almost more than a month now, and we have a new deal. Would you say the strategy has been successful? And just to put this in context, there is a pause for 90 days, but tariffs have been reduced. US to China is at 10%. Uh, no, US to China is at 30%. China to US at 10%. So
Mhm.
US at the moment has more tariffs on Chinese goods than the other way around. And I think Trump and his members of cabinet who are making these arrangements have also sought to open Chinese markets to US goods.
Mhm.
So yeah, what were your thoughts on the latest development?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't exactly surprised when I heard a deal was going to is being going to be made, or on the process of being made, because again, I think what we know now are just the initial conversations, the initial agreements
Yeah.
just happening, and the actual deal is needing to be worked on. I think there's
Mhm.
still work in progress, but again, we
Yeah.
have an idea what that deal is going to look like. Just to highlight, so between the 2nd of April until now, which is the 14th when the deal kind of kicked in, trade between the United States and China decreased significantly, right?
Yeah.
And when you put the calculations together, it says that the two countries boycotted each other's product,
Mhm.
disrupted that trade that last year topped 660 billion. So that's
Right.
the trade between the United States and China, right? Last year,
Mhm.
trade between those two countries was 660 billion.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That is certainly a lot of money, right? Another thing Trump has been talking a little bit about has been the trade imbalance
Mhm.
between the United States and China, which is pretty significant if you look at
Yeah,
it
look at the numbers. Yeah.
fairly. If you look at the numbers, it's pretty significant. I'll just give you a little bit of give you a little bit of the numbers. The United States imports from China in 2024. The United States imported 438.9 billion dollars worth of goods from China. Export, so what they sold to China for 2024 was 143.5 billion
Right.
of goods sold. So the trade deficit now between the two, so import export, the difference is 295.4 billion. So almost 300 billion
100
dollars.
billion. Yeah.
That's the imbalance. And I think that's what Trump has been talking about from the very first day he got into office. Hey, other countries are taking us for a ride. We need to create a balance, right? And I think that is where this tariff the desire for tariffs to kind of
Yeah.
create that balance. So
Yeah.
just to give you a little bit of that background history, right? How we got here. Now, it's been a month of back and forth, escalating. The United States adds a few, China
Yeah.
adds, until they got to 145% of goods from the US to China, and 125% from 145 from China to the US, and
Yeah.
then 125
25.
from the US to China. So significant increases the past month. Eventually, eventually they've arrived some sort of a deal. And why don't we let Donald Trump talk a little bit about this deal before we get
Yeah.
into it? I will put the clip up, have Donald Trump explain what that deal seems to be, and then we can add a few things to it.
Yeah.
After productive talks in Geneva, both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the largest structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs. Because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States. The talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. China will also suspend and remove all of its non-monetary barriers. They've agreed to do that. Well, they're very numerous. But again, to me, the biggest thing that came out of that meeting is they've agreed. Now we have to get it papered, but they've agreed to open up China. It's going to be great for everybody.
If a longer-term deal is not reached with China at the end of these 90 days, can the American people expect those tariffs to go back up to 145%?
No, but they would go up substantially higher.
Okay. And then on
You know, at 145, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy. But they can go, they got very high because of additional tariffs I applied during the.
So we've listened to Donald Trump explain. Can you talk a little bit about what that, because again, it's a little tricky in terms of how they got to the 30% and the 10%, right? So initially
Yeah.
145% tariffs by the United States. They all agreed that they were going to cancel 91%. So 91% cancel automatically. And then they both agreed that they were going to suspend 24. And that's how they arrived at 30 and 10, right? Which is a very
Yeah.
crazy formula. It doesn't seem like it's balanced, but again, it does make sense. I was at 45. I'm going to take away 91, and then I'm going to suspend 10. No, I'm going to suspend 24% for 90 days. You are going to deduct, cancel 91%, and then suspend 20% for 90 days. And that's how we arrived at the 30 and the 10. What other things did you hear Donald Trump talk about?
I thought that he said opening of the U.S. Opening of China to U.S. product. I think that was one significant thing that he achieved in this. Because if you go to China, you don't see US cars there. You're not seeing
Mm,
Cadillacs there. You're not seeing Chryslers there. They turn everywhere. North America here, you see all the Toyotas, all the Nissans. So everybody who has eyes can see. I mean, just go to your house and look at the number of things that you use that are made in China, and then try to count the number of things that you use in your house that are made for you in Canada for people that live in the US, made in US. You see that almost 95, 99% of the things that you use in your house are made in China. So this was dangerous dependent on the US. And also, a lot of people in the US were complaining that China was stealing IPs, producing these
mhm,
goods at lower cost, and then selling it back
mhm,
to the US with US IPs. And then there's no way to track them. You cannot track them and sue them for intellectual property rights because who are you going to track? It's something that is controlled by the government. There's a lot of secrecy, you know. So I think another thing is the opening of the US markets and maybe the ability to be able to keep US IPs so that they can continue to monetize their ideas, their products, should China try to capitalize on it.
mhm. So when you talk about automobiles, so cars, for example,
Right.
why do you think there are no U.S. cars or not enough U.S. cars selling in China, for example? Do you think it's
Yeah.
because it's a policy the Chinese government has
Well,
used policies to kind of prevent American cars from being imported, or would you argue that maybe they don't drive American cars because they're not maybe
they're not
they're a
good.
little too expensive? They are too. I mean, American cars are like huge,
Yeah.
too not very good in energy consumption and
Consumption.
things like that.
Yeah.
Do you think would that be a reason, or is it just we don't want American cars and that's it?
And I think it's a combination of both, but if I have to prioritize it, I think it's a Chinese government policy, the government of Chinese policy, that they will make import of foreign cars as expensive as possible,
Right,
that you cannot even have factories to
right,
manufacture those. And maybe when you look at cars, there are different grades. You say cars differently the way you say in China, the way you
right.
say in America. You don't have the same brands of Toyotas you have in
Hmm.
China that you have in the US.
Hmm.
So I think these companies can adapt to markets and meet
Okay.
market demands and stuff like that. But then I think the principal reason is the government policy. I
Government
mean,
policies, right?
I don't blame the Chinese. They are trying
It's
to grow their
protectionist,
company. It's protectionist,
to a
yes,
certain extent. If you
to a
have
certain extent.
a,
The company that you want to grow.
manufacturing
China,
company that
Canada
you
is doing the same thing. Canada is doing
yes,
the same thing with its
and the
agricultural
US
products,
too does a
and
little bit the
The
same
US,
because
US does the same.
I mean, we've talked
Yeah,
about this a lot with 100% on EVs, so electric
on
cars. Is
EVs,
it
right?
100%?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
I
We
think
still have
is
100%
that high, right? Again, just
on Chinese EV cars because they're really
Chinese
cheap.
EV cars, right? Again, just so that they want it to
So they
be as
to be
competitive,
as possible, right? Yeah. So because every country has to, and I think it's the right of the government
right?
to protect the interests of its country. But then when you have one person or power and they can wield it and almost like shut down your economy and almost like lead to unrest in your country.
Yeah,
Um, um,
which is something we're going to talk about the
which is
unrest.
something we're going to talk about.
But
Yeah.
a few other things that Trump, maybe one other thing before you
Yeah.
add, Trump did also indicate that there are certain exceptions. There are certain
With
um,
skill, blah blah blah. Yeah.
items that are outside of the deal that they reached.
Right.
So there's still, of course, tariffs on Chinese cars, of course,
Hmm.
steel and aluminum, which I think
No.
is a big deal. Again,
Huge.
that talk
Yeah.
about that protectionist policy
Right.
where America has a steel industry that is trying to
It's
find its
trying to
way, right?
revive. Yeah.
So of course they have to protect it. And
They
again,
have to
Trump
revive.
has or both parties have agreed that
Right.
cars, steel, and aluminium are outside of this deal.
This deal.
There's
Right.
also
Hmm.
pharmaceuticals. A lot of
Pharmaceuticals.
pharmaceuticals are
Hmm.
made in
It's
China.
coming from China. Yeah.
A lot of it made in
Yeah.
China. They
Yeah.
supply the rest of the world,
Yeah.
basically speaking, right? So if America needs to boost its pharmaceutical companies,
They,
they need to protect themselves from
they do.
the
Yeah.
inflow of pharmaceuticals from China. I would assume that that is why these two is outside the deal, right? I
Yeah.
just wanted to highlight there we have exceptions to
Yeah,
the
yeah. So you can tell even Trump knows that there's a lot to grapple with this deal. There's a lot to iron out. There's a lot of things that they still have to go back and forth.
Mhm.
It's not a done deal. I know globally it says 30 and 35, 30 and 10%.
Yeah.
But then there's still a lot of details. And I'm sure these people are like experts in their fields. They are
Uh-huh.
negotiators. They do that for a living.
Yes.
So they have to go point by point and iron out these things.
These things, right?
It's a lot of work. People have dedicated their entire career to be able to make such negotiations and
Mm.
talk on such levels in ways that we have no idea. But you can tell that there's still a lot of things that need to be ironed out. Even they are not actually sure. Now, I think the main thing was just to ease the temperature to
Yes.
see how the stock market reacted. They almost instant
And
rebound.
we will talk about
Yeah,
the
we'll talk
impacts on
about
the
that.
stock
Yeah,
market and all that.
yeah,
A good question that was asked, and which I guess Donald Trump kind of answered, which I want you to react to.
yeah,
If at the end of the 90 days there's no deal, what
yeah.
happens?
Well, he already gave a hint that it's going to go up probably, but not to the level at
Hmm.
which it was
Right,
prior.
right.
So he's still pressing the buttons there. I don't know. Yeah, I think you'll be unwise to take it back to that level, looking at how unpredictable the markets have been.
Right.
and the impact on his popularity, because that's very important to him as well.
We talked about this in our last show.
Yeah,
That at some point, man, things need to start happening.
yeah, things
You
is
know,
happening.
there has to be a limit. People have a limit to how patient or how
Yeah,
much pressure or stress
right.
or
Yeah,
they can take, right? At a certain point, if we don't see improvements in our lives, if we don't see
yeah,
things changing, of course, we start holding you accountable.
yeah.
And that's how your ratings
And
start dropping.
your
And
very
again,
voters start. Yeah, yeah.
Trump is not a man. Trump does not like his ratings drop
Ratings.
at all. So
Yeah,
he definitely needed to make steps. Again, just to say that China is not the only, has not been the only country that is working on a deal. I know
no, no.
last week the United States and
India
no and and United Kingdom
and United Kingdom, they had a deal already.
had a deal. Like the deal was made, it's done, it's signed, and that is dealt with. I know they are
Right.
working with India on. They are still
In
working
India.
on a deal with India. I
Right.
know they are working on a deal with Japan, with South Korea, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
again, it's work in progress. And imagine that more than
You can.
60 countries were involved in this tariff battle, and he
Right.
has to work a deal with every one of them. So
Every one of them.
it's not something that is going to end today. But I think what his strategy is, I would try and get a deal with the
Tackle the
bigger
top guy.
economies first,
Right.
and then the rest would kind of follow, right? I feel
Yeah.
like that's how he's looking at it now.
Just think about it. You have a fight with a family on the other side of the street. Then they come to your house, and then the very first person that they beat is your dad, who's supposed to defend you and the strongest guy in the
He's
house.
done.
Everybody has to
Yeah.
adjust. You have to adjust accordingly. There's no willpower. I mean, they've taken down the first guy. What are your chances? So if he can strike a deal with the big economies, China in particular, if he can strike a deal with China, everybody's gonna follow
They will
suit.
fall in line. Everyone else
They
will
will
fall
fall
in
in
line.
line. Yeah,
Right.
because they've taken out the dad of the house. The rest of the little people in the house have to follow suit. That's just how it works.
Yes. But again, question, and I don't know if we should talk about this now or at the end, towards the end of the show. Not like in who won, but who
Yeah.
came out looking strong. But again, question that I want us to think about. We'll talk
Let's
about
think
this at the
about
end. I want us to kind of
yeah.
go through this first.
Right. Yeah.
So, question for you: why would China want a deal like this? Why is China wanting a deal at this point? What do you think is happening there? I know you have some
We
ideas. What is happening?
we already kind of hinted like
Right.
so before April 2nd, everything is working fine, and then on April 2nd, boom, there is an instant tariff that doubles the price of the goods. That means all of these companies that are dependent on US consumption, and I just read something crazy. Chinese market has almost 14%. US market is almost 14% of China's consumption. So China is basically US factory.
Right.
And you have 14% tentatively of your population that are working just to serve the consumerism of another country. And then
Right.
this country says, no, we don't want your product. Those are people who have kids, those are people who have families, those are business owners that are responsible for the employment of thousands and thousands. What are we talking of millions? China is like 1 point something
Millions
billion.
of people.
What is 14% of that? That's more than hundreds of millions of people who are whose jobs are going to be affected directly or indirectly. And then you're also talking about the impact on the industries that are not directly. So the transporters, the clerks, the administration, every other thing that is there to support that 14%. It's a
Right.
lot. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And then you cannot sustain those people's salary because the consumers are not buying. And not to say there's also a huge impact on the US because the same
Mm-hmm.
thing applies.
Mm-hmm.
The people who work at the shipping docks, the people who are the truck drivers,
Right.
the shipping clerks, the shipping administrators, the people who have to stock the ships. And so there's a lot too on the US side, but
Yeah.
you cannot say that the impact on China
No, there's impact on both for sure.
was
So
massive.
I want us to listen to an expert tell us
Mm,
a little bit why they believe
right,
China. And this is, video is courtesy of CNN. So let's
right.
listen.
It's in Beijing. Mark, why did the government of China agree to this? Jake, I think this is about economics. This is also about ego. China wanted respect. It didn't want to be bullied by the United States. This has been a big point of conversation on Chinese social media. So after a number of overtures from Washington, this decision to meet in Geneva, which is seen as neutral territory, these talks move forward. The other aspect of this is the economics. China's economy was already shaky before this trade war. Then it hit really hard. It added to concerns about manufacturing, about exports. That also led to the conversations. But I want to point out some very important context here. This U.S.-China relationship is still very fragile. It's a point I'm hearing over and over again. Trade deals are very tricky. They can fall apart very easily. So if we look at some of the messaging that is coming from Beijing, Jake, it's very guarded. While there is optimism, we're also hearing some restraint from the central government.
Yeah.
Thoughts? I'll let you go first.
I mean, he's an expert on the field, so I take his word seriously. But yeah, it's kind of what I was hinting
Not
to
different
the
from what you
Chinese.
said, anyway, because again,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
like we
yeah.
know.
Shake it.
You
I
might be the
think
expert, but we also have ideas as well.
we also have idea. We have common sense, Yeah, I don't know about how shaky the Chinese government is, but in terms of the economy, it makes sense for them to strike a deal now
Right.
because of the sheer dependence on U.S. consumption of your products.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was shaky. I'm happy that they have a deal.
I get the impression that even though China was hurting as well as the United States, but I get a feeling from what he said, the overtures that the United States made, I get a feeling the United States wanted this a lot more than China did. Because
yeah,
again, when Xi Jinping he really didn't care much or didn't
right,
openly indicate a frustration or a care
right, right.
to the tariffs. He
Yeah.
really said very
But
little or
you also,
nothing about
yeah,
tariffs. But
yeah,
again, this was what he did in public, right?
yeah.
But I get the feeling that it was more of the United States urging
Yeah,
to have a
yeah,
conversation with China, urging
right.
to either propose or reach
Mm-hmm,
a deal with China, as opposed to
mm-hmm.
China looking for. Again,
Looking for a deal.
I'll make a comparison. Britain, their prime minister ran immediately to Trump and hey, we need to fix this. Let's hash out the deal.
Yeah, yeah,
India, the same thing. Modi was in the US
yeah.
shortly after the tariff debacle. Japan, South Korea, all these guys came to the United States, approached the United States to work out a deal.
Right.
China did not.
China did not. Yeah.
They did not, right? So again, I'm not saying that they were not hurting at all, but I'm
Mm-mm.
saying that because again, they talked about respect and Chinese pride, and
Right.
again, it's
Yeah.
a big economy,
That was a big
probably
economy.
even bigger than the United States. Some argue
Right.
that the
Yeah.
Chinese
Yeah. Somebody.
economy
Yeah.
is bigger than the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really necessarily agree that the economy is bigger than the US. They want to be second, but I mean, experts say the economy is bigger.
The gun is. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
they could withstand that pressure for a reasonable period of time.
Right.
And again, like I said, I get the feeling that the United States wanted this a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
than China. But again, this is debate. This is very
Yeah.
debatable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Again,
And
that is
I,
how I see it.
yeah, I don't know the details of that. I'm not really invested in understanding the Chinese political scene and now. First of all, it's a very secretive state. It's very
Mhm,
hard to get information out of them.
mhm.
Even if people were out there striking and protesting, it's not
It's
something
hush
that you
hush.
easily find on. You won't find it on social media. It's hard fudge, right? They are not as loud mouth as Americans are, as upfront as Americans. So there's a cultural difference at play too.
Mm,
Even if they're stressed about something, they seem to be calm.
mhm.
Work out your stress behind closed curtains. It's not Trump who shows his strength, and you see his strength. He speaks of his strength, and then you're supposed to know that this is what he wants to do. I think the Chinese are a little bit reserved, private in how they do things. Not meaning that they are not sophisticated. They are very
Yeah,
sophisticated.
quite sophisticated group of people.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd
yeah,
assume
but
so.
not outgoing, not outspoken as US is too. And we also have to keep in mind it's also a political warfare as to who is war power here. There's who's the number one spot, who can hurt each other more. So there's that aspect of ego too, that the
Yeah.
Chinese think that they are up there. They're supposed to consider a superpower, in
Mhm.
many cases more than the US. So
Right.
I think that's at play too. But I won't discount the cultural aspect of this too.
So again, let's talk about the hurt. We talked about the
Yeah,
Chinese economy hurting as a result of these tariffs, and
right.
we're going to watch a clip that
Yeah,
shows us a little bit of that.
a little bit.
Um, the volume is not quite good because again,
Mhm.
it's clips out of China, so
It,
somebody was probably hiding somewhere and trying as much as possible to capture this event
yeah,
without being seen, right?
yeah,
So the video quality is not the best. And
yeah.
then hopefully, I think in an attempt to mask the voice,
Right.
they did a little thing on it so that
AI or
it is
something.
not, the
Yeah.
voice is not you can't really
Mhm, mhm.
identify who was making the
Yeah.
video. Let's watch and then we'll talk a little bit about that.
Zhejiang province are shouting in unison, demanding the company pay their overdue wages. The workers went on strike starting April 28th due to the company's long-standing failure to pay wages. The next day, they gathered in front of the Wujian town government to protest, continuing to pressure for the wages they've been owed since January. However, the police arrested several protesters on the spot.
They stopped us all here and didn't let us eat.
Hey, another one. Look, the one over there was arrested again. The police arrested him directly. A worker at Shungji
Again, almost I mean,
Man.
back to what we said, right? In terms of
Yeah, you
what they
won't
are.
see them interviewing. You won't see them interviewing somebody to say, okay, what do you think? Because we who live in North America, we have a different concept of freedom of speech that people in China do not have, or it's not part of their culture. But you're here, you're free to express your mind. You can even tell the president go to hell, and no one cares. You can't do that in China. Protesting in China is a huge thing. I think the people in China take an enormous amount of risks to go out to protest against the government.
Mhm.
It's not easy. From what I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, people just disappear, and that's it. You know, in the US, you can make a noise, you can be an opposing, you can insult even the governor and the president, and everything's fine. The concept of freedom of speech in China is not the same in the way people understand in America. So I think that's a lot. That's why they weren't showing people's faces directly, and like
Mhm.
you hinted earlier, the person who was vegetarian was probably hiding and no wanted to be seen because you probably get in trouble should someone have you videotaping them. It's a different mindset. Again, highlights a cultural difference that exists between these two huge economies. So I don't think we're getting a clear picture of what is happening in China.
Well,
It's hard
exactly.
to get that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're not even experts on Chinese economy or whatever. So we're just sharing our opinions here. But yeah,
But
this,
I mean, again, it's almost obvious. We
yeah,
all know what the community that the government of how the government operates.
yeah,
Opposition is not
it's a huge
necessarily
crackdown.
tolerated, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Dissidents are not
They deal with immediately.
dealt with immediately. So it's hard to figure it again as a common man on the street who gets information from videos like this or from
Right,
YouTube or from Facebook.
right.
It's hard to find any real information coming out of China
Yeah, yeah. It's hard
onto
to. It's,
Facebook and onto so you mostly get.
they don't even use Facebook in China.
They don't even use Facebook in China, so you can imagine how hard that might be.
Right.
So you don't exactly you only get the government narratives.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That
Yeah,
is who you hear from, that is what you get.
that's
Now,
what. Yeah,
to access to the common man on the street who might have a phone and do a video here and there,
no,
we really don't have access to it. So
no,
you
no, no.
remember, as I said, that the government does not appear to be as stressed on this tariff
Yeah, yeah,
as the government of the United States. But
yeah.
again, videos like this tell you that hey, we might put a bright face and show a lot more confidence and
Right, right.
a lot more confidence in our economy. But again, there's stresses.
There's
There's
stresses. There's
stressors
stresses. Yeah,
everywhere, right? And this is a clear example of one of those stressors.
yeah.
China, I mean, the tariffs have
It
had
was hard. It was hard
significant
to get.
impact.
It was hard to even get an understanding of what's happening. Like, what does a common Chinese person feel? It is hard.
You never
You
know.
can. You never know.
You
You
never know.
never know
Just
what a
like
common.
COVID, we we,
Just
we,
like
we,
COVID.
we all experienced COVID together, and
Right.
you did not get any message from China.
No. No,
from,
no.
I don't know, they have bloggers or they have YouTube. I don't know what they have, but you don't get anything out of them. COVID, it was complete lockdown of
You see,
information of people. Like, you couldn't get
I
much.
think right now there's even a lockdown in China that people don't know about. I think there's some disease going on, and this lockdown that people don't know about. That's why they was so spoiled here that you don't even know what people are going through. Um, you just go on the me and you will just have our phone and our microphones and we can say what we think, and for the most part we know that we'll go scot-free if we don't insult anybody in power and stuff like that. You know, but then I don't know if people can do this in China. I don't know if people can dissent to government policy publicly.
You can
A
descend, you
country
hide in
where
your home with your
you can
family.
dissent,
And again, you need to be careful because a member of your family could be part of
it
the
can just
government,
disappear.
and that cannot happen, right? So dissent is
Ca-
very, it has to be done very
You
carefully.
have to be done, yeah,
Feel.
carefully. And you have to tell the government, like, let the government, if they find you guilty of corruption at a certain level, they execute you the next
Yeah,
day. There's
executed.
no
Yeah,
time for you to go
there's
and
no.
appeal your case and blah, 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 and go through all the due process and whatever. Due process is very different there than what it is here. So, again, the cultural difference is massive. The way they do business, the way they operate on a larger industrial scale is different from the way industries in North America and to a larger extent the rest of the world operates.
So again, we've talked about the impacts of these tariffs on China. Now let's focus on the United States, where we have a
Yeah,
lot more information on how
we have a lot more.
the economy of the United States is doing, and then we are big because we have a lot more information. We could definitely have a lot more to say, right?
Right.
So let's start with um we have a little clip here again, courtesy of CNN, Erin Bennett's show, talking
Right.
to one of the heads of a port in the United States,
Yeah.
and again, that is how you know how you can evaluate
Right.
trade, right? Because again, trade mostly happens through
To the
planes. Don't
seaport.
bring things into it has to come
No.
through the sea, and you can know how the economy is doing when you take a look at how busy the ports are, right? So again, this tells us a little bit about how the United States is dealing with tariffs and how it's impacting the people. I will put the clip up and we'll make our comments after.
He is the executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, which is the busiest port in the United States. You know, our Nick Watt has been going to the port, again and again over days and talking to workers as you started to see the dramatic drop off, right, in cargo, was numbers, and then it became reality at your port. So, we've got new video of the port tonight. Obviously, it's not as busy as usual. Now, nobody expected Trump to do this, right, to just back off and drop it by the amount that he did. So I guess the question to you is this: how bad was it that he did something this dramatic?
Well, Aaron, I think the conversation really got amplified by the media, by folks in the industry, people that went and visited Washington. And when you saw the stark reality of cargo at the biggest port dropping by more than 30% last week, slamming on the brakes, China cargo, I think it got a lot of people's attention.
We've been seeing the ghost ships, right? Or they've been skipping port because there's nothing to pick up, so that they're continuing on their sail route, but half empty or less than that. What do the ships look like that are coming into port?
Well, they're fewer than they were. So we're going to welcome 16 ships again this week to Los Angeles. 11 of those will have made a port call in China, but another 4 from China have been completely canceled. So by the end of this month, we'll be down 20% in the number of ship calls and probably about 25% in the volume of cargo. All that means is less jobs on the docks, the truckers, and the warehouse folks. And that happens right away.
So where are we on that in terms of the job loss? I mean, this is the intermodal industry, right? When you have a cargo container come and it can be popped right onto a train and can move, or a truck. What's happening?
It'll lag by a week, but we started to get a glimpse of this last Friday. There were maybe 300-400 dock workers that didn't go out to their normal jobs last Friday. We had only 8 ships in port. Over the weekend, 6 and 7. Today was 9 ships. So there are fewer job opportunities for the dock workers. This week, we'll start to see the truckers haul fewer containers. If they were hauling 4 or 5 per day last week, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 this week. The volume drop was that precipitous.
Ghana impact.
He laid it out perfectly. I think that's someone who knows what he's talking about. So just kind of what we hinted at, job in the work, and it was gonna jump again. And I think although the tariffs have been signed, and there's ease in the trade war, it's still gonna be another month or so before they pick up their jobs, because these ships
Mhm,
have to leave China and they have to
mhm,
load it, and before they come back,
mhm, mhm.
unless they were staying at sea, all this while waiting for a trade
I
deal to
doubt.
happen. You doubt, yeah, but I guess they have to weigh the cost of turning the ship back and going to China, or just floating on the ocean. But anyways, yeah, he almost said that's 20% of the workforce down. You know, how many unemployment that is? He said 400 people
Mhm.
didn't go back to work. Yeah, that's a huge impact on the economy. You know, you just lay off 400 people. That's a lot. That's a lot of unemployed people. And I mean, in the US again, we see the difference that you can have um, the president or the CEO of the ship company go to the news and share his ideas,
Mhm.
something that is hard to find in China. So we can really see these things in the US, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to find in China.
Exactly. Like I said, we have a lot more information because there's a lot more freedom, and
To
people
talk
are
about
able
it,
to
yeah.
express themselves to a larger extent. I mean, 30% drop in activity on the port, right? 400
Yeah,
people not workers not getting to work. So now I think there's definitely a chain reaction. See, goods come from China, the
yeah,
dock, right? There are people who work in the ports. It's the
to
biggest
unload
port
them
in the US, Los Angeles port.
in
There are
the
people
in Western Hemisphere.
in the
Hemisphere.
Western Hemisphere. There are people who work there, right? So they get the goods out of the ships, and then now they get to load them on trucks,
Trucks, yeah,
right? If the goods don't come, the truckers don't have anything to haul.
no, no.
They have no goods to move. So you're only looking at the 400 port workers,
Port workers, yeah. You're
not
not looking at the
workers. Okay,
truckers.
talk about the truckers. How many of
Yeah,
them are sitting
will
and
not have a
waiting for
job.
goods to haul, and there's nothing to move, right?
They're not gonna
Again,
have.
it doesn't only end there. These truckers
The
have to come.
stockers in
Maybe
the
they're
shop.
living they have to live in a hotel. They have to eat in a restaurant. They have to dine here. They have to drink a bottle of beer or two.
Yeah,
Now there's no work.
yeah,
They either are not coming, or
yeah,
even when they come, because again they are not sure when they're going to go back,
yeah.
or if they're going to haul anything. They are not spending money,
No,
right? They are not spending money. Maybe they're living in their trucks. Maybe they are not. They are not living in the best hotel. So you see how it trickles down, right? And you see how it affects almost everyone who's
right.
on that line, who's connected to.
Yeah,
You might not
yeah,
be directly working at the port and say, hey, my husband is no, but you have a
yeah,
restaurant, and these port workers and these truckers come there to eat. And
yeah.
if they are not there to eat because there's nothing to haul, again,
Yeah.
now there's impact there.
There's
If
impact
you
there.
normally get your child to the movies every weekend because you have a restaurant, you make a little bit of money, right?
Yeah, you can do that
That
anymore.
week, there's nobody buying, or there's not a lot of money coming in. Are
Yeah,
you going to be sending your kids to the cinema paying money? No. So
no,
it affects, if you see how it breaks
everything.
down
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how it trickles down and affects,
yeah.
has
And
on
what
intended
you have not
consequences.
even mentioned is the main thing is the goods that you want to go and buy will
The
not be
goods that,
are no longer
yeah,
there.
yeah, are no
You
longer there.
know, the things that you expect and your daily life depends on, you go to Walmart or whatever your favorite shop is, and you will not be
Right.
able to find them. Or they become more expensive because there's very limited supply, and
Mhm.
you have a few people that have the last ones, and they skyrocket the price. So I mean, you can hear he could tell those are the direct impacts, but the indirect impact of all the trade war is massive. I don't think we can even measure this. You spend a whole PhD to be able to
To be do that.
measure all the indirect impacts of these tariffs were they to continue, because there's a lot of chain reaction, like you've articulated, that will come out from that tariff should they have stayed.
I mean, this is an obvious answer question. Who pays the price for tariffs?
And of course, the
Is it the
consumers,
companies
because
that manufacture the goods? Is it the companies that ship the goods? Is it who pays the price?
yeah,
Because I
who
get the
pays the
feeling
price?
it's
Yeah.
it's it's us, it's the consumers
Yeah,
who
it's,
pay.
they shift it to the consumer. They shift it to consumer. So that's it. You have to pay more if you really need something, and that's the only thing that you're depending on. You know it's from China. Yeah,
And your
they're gonna
baby
shift
needs
it
to
to,
eat, man.
And baby needs to eat, or they need the
What are
medicine.
you going to do? Give him fufu
Whatever.
or cocoyams? No, you have to give him milk, and it comes. You understand what I'm saying, right?
All right,
You
I
have to
do
go
get it.
pay
Yeah.
triple the price just so that your people can eat,
If-
right? I
Yeah.
just came back from the store
Right. Yeah.
to get a few things. No, price
Yeah.
it's
It's going
expensive.
up.
It
And,
is.
and we
It
know
it
we
is.
know that Trump's his end goal is to bring manufacturing back to the US, but these things don't happen overnight. You have to
No,
build
it takes. I
factory. You
hear
have
it,
to
it could take about 5 to 10 years.
at least 5 to 10 years to
Mhm.
get to the state. So right now he's just turning the ship. He's just stopping the what has been the status quo,
Right.
and then he's just turning around to restart things again. And it's just changing the course. I would say at the moment,
And
you don't build
he,
factory
he
overnight.
he certainly has a tough battle ahead of
Yeah,
him,
so
because what companies have done, what I've heard companies do is the tariffs with China are 145.
yeah,
The tariffs with Malaysia are about 45 or less. The
mhm.
tariffs with Thailand are a little less. So what they do is they move
To the
their
next.
production to Malaysia or to Thailand or to Cambodia, where the
Right.
tariffs are less. So instead
Mm.
of moving it to the United States, as Trump is hoping they would do, they
Yeah,
shift over
they
to
can ship
Thailand or to
to
Malaysia,
Thailand. Yeah.
and then they produce there and ship at a cheap. I mean,
Hmm.
not cheaper, but tariffs not as high as though they were coming from China.
Yeah.
So they seem to just be moving around, because again, doing business in the US is expensive.
It is expensive.
It
Yeah.
is expensive. I heard some a CEO in one of these clothing manufacturing companies says even at 145 it's still cheaper to produce in China.
Generally,
Can
in
you
the US.
imagine?
Yeah. Yeah.
Say even at 145% is still cheaper for them to produce in
In
China
China.
and
Right.
pay that 145% to the US,
Right. I
right?
just look at the
So,
cost
so
of
he,
living in the US.
Donald Trump has is an uphill battle,
He has an
because now
uphill
when they
battle.
move from China to Thailand or Malaysia, for example, what will he do? Would he now increase the tariffs from Malaysia
Tariffs
just
and
so that
bread. Yeah.
to force them to
Yeah.
move to some other place?
Right.
And who says
Yeah.
they're going to move to the US? Maybe they
Yeah.
move to Cambodia or they move to
Maybe they
some
do.
other Asian. And at the end of the
I
day,
think I think the only leverage he has is China also wants to keep its citizens
of
employed.
course, they
So
need to keep those people employed too, right?
so yeah, so China, in as much as we know the US was motivated to make this deal happen, China too is very motivated to, because it's almost becoming a political issue where dissenting will become more common in
Of course,
China should
of
you
course,
have a lot of unemployed
right.
people. And China doesn't want. China is a one-party state. Everything is controlled by the central government, the Chinese Communist Party. They have a grip on everything.
Mhm.
News stations, public, the PR of the state,
Right,
the banks, everything. So they control everything. And they have an invested interest in keeping their people employed and
right.
making sure their main shipping country is open for business.
Yeah. And again, just to be clear, the United States is the biggest, is China's, probably
China's
the biggest
biggest,
market.
right? Yeah,
It's China's
the
biggest
amount of
market.
consumerism in the United
Yeah,
States is crazy.
it's terrible. It's terrible that
Yeah, when you think about it,
350 million to 400 million people consume a lot
consume
more than the rest
for
of the
yeah,
world.
yeah, they
It's
do.
it baffles me. But
When you
again,
think
I
about it,
mean that is the United States. That's
that
what
is
they
the
do.
United. It's a market that's open to everybody.
Yeah. So again, just have a little video here. It captures what we've talked about, but again, of course, in language that is a lot
Different
more
ways. Yeah,
different than us, right? But again, I think it's kind of similar. So I'll put it up and then we can comment and move to the next
sure.
topic. Yeah.
Lab at Yale. So this is even after this announcement. So you're going from 145 to percent to 30%. They are still saying that the average.
Again, in terms of who pays the cost of tariffs, I think that is the direction
Okay.
we are heading to. We want to figure out who pays the cost of the tariffs. Who is the victim?
Who's the
I
victim?
think
Yeah.
I
Who's
think
the
that is the
victim? Yeah.
proper word to use. Who is the
Yeah.
victim in this war?
Average prices are going to go up by 2%, okay, in the long run. And that, to them, they say that this is going to be the average middle class family's increase per cost per year is $2,337. That's the increase in cost. That's with this dramatic decline from 145% to 30%. That's still a massive amount of money.
Every retailer I talked to said they're going to do their level best to pass on the tariff cost to the consumers.
Right.
Parts suppliers are saying, I'm going to pass it on to the factory. Now, obviously, there's some work to do around trying to find efficiencies, and maybe if the company can use a little bit of margin compression in that equation, they will try to, but it's going right through.
It's coming right to you, Ghana.
Yeah,
It's coming
exactly.
straight to
Yeah.
me. So it
Straight to
doesn't
you.
matter what they do. At the end of the day, we have to cover the cost of the 145%.
Yeah, we do. We do. Like any economy, they shift it to the consumer. So, number one, to shoulder the stress on the government on their business and whatever, they just pass it to you. The question is whether the consumers are willing to change their lifestyle in order to meet the new world order right now. Are you willing to go without meat in your food? Are you willing to go without your child's favorite milk? Or are you willing to go without your favorite toy? Are you willing to not have Prime, Amazon Prime, where you can order today and receive tomorrow, where things will become more expensive? Where if you used to buy the regular cheap Chinese watch, now you have to buy Apple Watch, probably still made in China, but it has an American brand to it and will be more expensive. So yeah, I don't think consumers are really willing to change. Even you can tell, even with COVID and with all this change and all the inflation, consumers is not really changed. People still like to spend. There's still people going out buying new cars, brand new cars. See people willing to spend, even if it meant going to credit card debt. So the amount of consumerism in North America is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I feel like if you go out and consume just because you can, or just out of free will, your choice,
Yeah,
it's a whole different thing. But if you're paying a lot more on basic goods,
yeah.
which are supposed to be
Which is
affordable
supposed to live on, right?
for the common man, which everyone
Mm,
lives on, milk, eggs,
mm,
um, little toys here and there, clothing. I mean, these are basic commodities. These are basic.
yeah, right.
You shouldn't spend half of your income just trying to get your kids something to eat,
Basic, yeah.
right? So I feel like that is where my problem is. I don't care. Go buy a new car. That's your
That's
choice to
up
get
to
a new car.
you.
Go buy a Louis Vuitton bag or go buy a Fendi. It's your choice, right? But again, I'm talking about the common man on the streets who
Come on, man.
can't afford the big names, but who needs something to put on, right?
Yeah,
And then you have to pay double and triple the price.
right.
Again, to me, that is where the problem is.
Yeah, yeah,
We are the
but you also have to know the normal man in America or North America lives a very comfortable life that the richest people in many places around the world
You're right.
cannot even afford. I mean, you have homeless people who have flat screen TV in North
Mhm,
America. You
mhm.
have homeless people who are fat. Like, where did you get enough food to eat that you're fat? So when someone says the poor in Africa, they are
They're poor.
wretched.
You look at them and you know.
You look at them, they're poor, so they have nothing to live on. There's like if you want to eat, it's some rat that you have gone to the forest and set a trap to catch and come and eat. But you have people on food stamps in Canada, in US, that are living a comfortable life that the average person who's working hard in a poor country cannot even imagine. You're poor and you have a car. Like who in Cameroon can even think of a car when they say you're poor? Cars are for upper middle class and above. You're poor and you have an iPhone. You're poor and you can go to a food bank and get food and come and eat. You have food stamps. You know, you're poor and you can have 3 meals a day. You're poor and you're taking in calories that is three people can consume in a poor country. So the mindset of North America, it's what a lot of people around the world cannot. You're poor and you have a warm shower. You're poor and you still have gas in your house. So yeah, unless you live after North America, you cannot really understand the concept of poor. Yeah, people are poor, and that's not to say people are poor here and people
Mhm.
suffer too. But yeah, it's this poor. You have to qualify the poor because it's poor in categories.
Right. So again, continuing with impact.
Yeah,
We know for sure, for certain, you don't have to be an expert to know that April 2nd, when the Liberation Day tariffs were announced, the stock market almost crashed.
right.
And the stock market has been down for the past 1 month.
Yeah,
No progress. If you know Trump, you know that he cares about the stock market.
yes,
And if you know Trump, he wouldn't want the stock market to be down because again,
right.
most of the time that's how he That's what he uses to determine the economy is doing.
The time is doing, yeah.
It's important to him that the stock market is doing
The
well.
value of your money, yeah.
The value of your money is growing. So the stock market has been down for about a month or even more. Again, starting April 2nd, where Liberation Day was announced and the tariffs went out and all that happened. Now they announced the deal, and things are looking up.
Yeah.
Things are looking
There's
better.
almost like a certain, like almost like a rebound of it. I know Bitcoin has almost gone back to what it was prior to the Liberation Day. Stock markets did very well for the last 2 days, and
Mhm.
this like comeback. So people who had invested in the dip are probably smiling right now.
Because
Um,
they're going to
the
going to the bank.
they're going to the value of the money has I always knew that was going to happen, but like we discussed in our last video too, at a certain point you have to correct this because his reputation is very important to him. You still want your voters to be able to have confidence that you're doing what you told them you're going to do, and it's improving their life. It's not
Mhm,
necessarily making things worse.
mhm.
So I knew with him a deal was going to happen at some point because for the benefit of US and China, it has to happen. And more importantly, for Trump's reputation and the view, his ratings, because he cares a lot about ratings
He
too.
cares about ratings, that's for sure.
It had to happen because you don't want the American public to lose confidence in your ability to lead the country. So I think this came at the right time, um, especially when you have 100 days. Before you could say, oh, the tariffs is just from the past presidency. I haven't had time to catch up. But he's past 100 days now. So a lot of
Right.
things we are supposed to be seeing the impact of his policies at the
Mhm,
moment. So
mhm.
I was happy that the deal was made. Maybe from a selfish point of view, you can be able to have your goods, the things that you want, and stuff like that, and buy things cheap. But then, in terms of Trump, his reputation, his ratings, those are things are very important to him, and it's very important that he has the confidence of the American people.
Right. Okay. So again, I just want to take a few seconds to listen to what this guy had to say about tariffs. Again, it's courtesy
Yeah,
of the CNN.
mm,
Um, for some reason, I felt like because again, I am for obvious reasons, I'm not one to watch CNN.
yeah,
But when it
not
came
me either.
to Trump, I feel like they are a little bit more. I heard a lot more
They're more
fairness
balanced now. Yeah, for me.
in their conversation about this tariff issue.
Mm.
Usually when I go there, there's a lot of bashing
There's a
of Trump and Democrats.
propaganda. Yeah,
I don't see that there's fairness in their analysis. I don't
hmm
see I don't see them, making arguments for both
having an
sides,
educated
right?
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But again, this for some reason they brought in guests who were able to make fair comments and were able to
right.
to to look at the pros and the cons and to really express themselves in that way. So
Yeah,
that's why I thought, okay, it might make sense to use this again, courtesy CNN, which is not something I would typically say.
me and you both.
Is instead of 145% tariffs from the U.S. side, 125% tariffs from the Chinese side, that is now 30% from the U.S. side, 10% from the Chinese side. And obviously the market liked that change, and a dramatic change it was on those top line rates quite a bit. If you look across all of the major indices, the Dow up more than 1,000 points, S&P 500 up more than 3%, the NASDAQ now shifting back heavily into bull territory. That reaction was significant. But it's important to note that while the baseline may have shifted, that shift includes tariffs that are still at a very high level. In fact, when you
Yep. So again, just wanted to highlight
Yeah,
the moves
no,
in the
the
stock
stock
market.
market.
If you had bought some shares and you had put in some money after April 2nd, I'm sure
It
you're
should be
probably
good right
laughing
now.
to the
Yeah,
bank today
you're probably
because
smiling
again
right now. Yeah,
things
yeah,
have picked up and the stock market is roaring and it's,
Roy.
it's it's stronger
It's
than it was
bullish
a
right
month
now.
ago, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
I think people have renewed confidence and everything has eased, so they 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 now trust that things can move on safely. So there's a lot of excitement in the stock market.
Right. So we get to our last video and then we conclude. Again,
Yeah,
it's one of Trump's intention for tariffs was to generate money. because again, no matter who pays, but money comes into the government coffers, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's what do you do with this money? All this money has come in. What do you do with it?
Right.
Do you kind of use it to
Hmm. Hmm.
better the lives of the citizens by, I don't know, I don't know how they do that. So again, the video that I'm about to play just kind of tells you how much money Trump's government has been able to bring in
Right.
just within the couple of weeks that this tariff war has played out, right? I just want us to think about how much money,
Hmm.
again, irrespective of who's
Hmm.
paying, but let's
Yeah.
just think about how much money the government has
Right.
at their
It's
disposal
saved. Yeah.
now and what they could really do with it. I know America has a dilapidating infrastructure.
Right.
They're struggling with infrastructure, that's for sure. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that it's
Hmm.
terrible. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what
That's
it
right.
said,
Yeah.
right? So, what do you do with this money? Social services,
Right.
infrastructure development, healthcare.
The
Where do you
debt
put
is
it?
crazy. The American debt too is crazy. It's
And do
compounding
you,
every day.
do you take it
You
back to
pay down
pay
the debt.
some of those debts? Because again, it's massive.
It's massive debt.
The debt is massive. Let's listen, and then we would give our comments.
The Trump administration obviously argues that the end goal of these tariffs is for America to make more money. Is that happening in any way?
Yeah, revenue, a key component the president often talks about, and that is actually playing out, as you would expect it would, given where rates have been. In fact, in the month of April, $16 billion in customs duty revenue. That's 130% higher than April of last year. And in fact, it's the largest monthly sum in at least a decade, perhaps even longer than that. The question, of course, Jake, is who's actually paying for that? U.S. importers pay tariffs. Oftentimes that gets transferred to the consumers. The administration claims that's not going to be the case this time around. No question that money is coming in. Who's actually financing that money, though? Still an open question as these negotiations play out, Jake.
Yeah. It's a lot of money. A lot of money is coming.
16 billion in a month.
Billion. That's a lot of money.
That is a
That's more
significant
than the
amount of money.
budget of many countries.
Cameroon
More
has
than
that much.
I don't know. I don't
I
really have
don't. I
that
don't
much.
know. Yeah, but that's,
One
I mean,
thing,
16 billion US dollars is a lot of money in a
that's a
month,
lot more in a month.
in four
Yeah.
weeks,
Yeah.
in 4 weeks. So if at all, we say, oh, he wanted to bring in some money. I mean,
He's
if
doing a good job.
if he failed in everything,
He's doing a good job.
he definitely did a good job here.
Right. And this goes to, I know we're concluding here. Do people, I know a lot of people just hate Trump, and maybe we just, or I just like Trump, and I'm blindsided to a lot of things. But then you cannot argue with the numbers, especially when it's
The
coming
numbers
from
speaks for themselves.
uh, um, um, a source that is always Trump hating. You know, if they can acknowledge that, the numbers speak for themselves. So I generally think Trump is winning in his strategy. There's some loopholes, but he's generally winning. He's giving the people what he promised, and he's not here to seek a third term. So he's going in full throttle,
Mhm,
and he's giving up. The guy is working hard for his country. He's working hard to make his citizens feel better. He's putting American interests first.
mhm,
Like any leader should do for the country. So in my opinion, he's huge. He's a consequential president. He is making things happen,
mhm.
whether
So
you like him or not. You have to agree. I agree with that. Yeah.
so not coming across as what's the word, as I don't know the word to use, but could we, who won, who blinked,
Yeah. Oh, I don't
who
know.
came out looking like they needed this more than the other?
Yeah.
Is that
Now,
something that we should even think or
you
talk
even
about?
think
Because again, it's not a competition, technically speaking.
it's not. It's not. Well,
So
I mean,
you're
look at
asking
it.
the question is a little, yeah.
It's a little bit tricky because the US is more import dependent and China is more export dependent. So they have different impact. I mean, they were impacted in different ways at various degrees. Um, if you ask me personally, and I'm not sure, the very fact that China is willing to open its market to U.S. goods, to the U.S. economy, that was a bigger win because I always knew they were going to have a trade deal.
Mhm,
But that China was able to open the market, and then I heard Trump say they're going to take away all the monitoring that they have.
Hmm.
That's a huge bill. That means the US now can openly sell to China without these huge tariffs, and so in that sense, the US won. Um, 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 but in the other sense of China, and we've talked about the difficulties of getting information out of China.
Hmm.
In the other sense of China, the US, the impact on US consumers, US goods, US workers. Yes, maybe the loss for a month or so, but they're back on trading terms. So yeah, China too. They have a fair deal. Now they're going to be open to the U.S. market. I don't know how much the Chinese Communist Party is willing to change and accept U.S. Goods and services and a little bit of U.S. culture. Does that mean they're going to be allowing Facebook and um,
Probably not.
Instagram and stuff? And so
Probably not.
those are things that they'll be thinking. Yeah, we'll see, we'll see. But there's a victory to share around. There's losses to share around as well.
And I
Yeah,
mean, that's the thing about a deal. A deal means, people come together and the people make compromises. I give a
yeah,
little and I get a little, right?
yeah, yeah.
So, and I think that is what both nations have done. They've probably sat back. It really didn't matter who initiated the meeting,
Right.
or who wanted the meeting more than the other. But
More
at the
than the
end of the
other.
day, it's give and take. I'll
Good.
lose some here, I'll win some here.
Win
And I
somewhere.
think that the good thing about diplomacy is that people can go back to their different countries and narrate the story however they
Narrate
want
the
to narrate
story.
it, and
Yeah,
and put it in a way that the
it
citizens of
favors
that
them.
nation
Yeah,
can accept as a win, right?
yeah.
And I think that is what is important about diplomacy. The United Trump can talk about how much he's won and what
Hmm.
they've done, and the Chinese government can go back and say,
They'll do
"Hey,
the same thing. Yeah,
we have won. Trump
yeah,
blinked and we
yeah,
came out strong, right?"
yeah,
Again, it's
yeah.
okay. They could go back
It's
and do that
okay.
because again, they do have a masses that
They have to respond to.
they
They
have
have
to
people that
they have to
they have to answer to.
answer to a larger extent, right? I mean, a lot more for the United States than China, but still, the Chinese government too has to answer to the people.
They have to answer to people.
They do
Right.
have to answer to the people. And again, that's the beauty about diplomacy. We can come here, disagree to agree, and then go
Hmm.
back to our different countries and present the people with whatever narratives that we
Right.
want. Yeah, there might be some gaps, some because again, Trump is very good at, he's been talking to Xi Jinping for about a week now, but there's been no phone call. Each time he
No
say,
phone
yeah,
calls.
we spoke, maybe we did
Exactly.
it, or we will, right?
Yeah.
But again, you can go back and put this anyhow you want, and have your people take it with a grain of salt if they want to. But again, that is the narrative that the United States is passing. They have won
Yeah.
as much
They won.
as China too is saying we
They
won,
probably say they won. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So again, it's more a matter of narrative
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and depending
Yeah.
on
I
who
think it
you
really
talk.
comes down. It really comes down to your people. Do your people feel the impact? Do your
Yes,
people feel like you won?
because I mean, at the end of the day, China would have won because these people who were would go back to work and get paid.
Yeah.
Because again, their products are getting into the US, right?
Yeah.
At the
Yes.
end
Yeah.
of the day, United States won too, because these products are coming in. The port workers who have been sitting home idle are
They
going
have
back
their
to work,
job.
they're getting paid, right? The truck drivers who have been sitting idle are going back to work, they're getting paid. And then the consumer now pays a lot less
Done.
than they
Yeah.
did 1 month ago. So
Right.
again, everybody win. It's
It's
win-win.
a
The
win-win
winning
for
goal
you.
it's
There's
it
a
go
lot to
it's
share around. So it's a hard
everyone, right?
question to say who won, who lost. I don't think we can really answer the question in those terms because it's very complex. Yeah.
It is. It is. Yeah. So yeah,
Mm.
that is what we have. Again,
Yeah.
like Trump, just again, Trump has been quite busy.
He's
Very,
been busy.
he's
He's
currently
been
in
busy.
the Middle East.
Yeah. And
Met with
the country he was in Saudi
Saudi
Arabia. I think he's
Arabia,
in Qatar today.
Qatar,
He'll
right?
probably go to Dubai tomorrow
Go
or
to
UAE
Dubai,
tomorrow.
yeah, and yeah, he
He's
has a
busy.
couple of
He's making
places to
deals.
go. He's
Like
busy making deals and
if
signing billions and
I
billions
feel
and
so
billions.
bad. I feel so bad for the Democrats because there's so many moving pieces. They don't even know where to attack.
They can't
By
catch
the time
up.
you
They
they
cannot
can't
catch
catch
up.
up. He's making deals here, signing this year, signing with China, signing. He signed almost how many was it? Almost a trillion with Saudi Arabia.
Right.
something, some
They're
exorbitant
investing a lot
amount
of
of money,
money.
a
Yeah.
lot of money that they agreed to. He went to Bahrain. He's probably going to sign another deal. He's going to go to Dubai. So if you're a Democrat, man, you won't have a hard time trying to criticize because the guy is just winning everywhere. He's signing this everywhere. He's showing strength, and more importantly, he's a salesman. He's able to talk to these
Yeah.
people in a way that he
Yeah.
can convince them that he's
Yeah.
making their interests heard.
Right.
So if you're the Democrat Party, if they are not careful, they're gonna be losing for a very long time, for a very, very long time. If Trump can have a smooth sale, have a deal made, make the US prices go down, make US interest go up, man, they
The
have a long
Democrats will be at it again.
and then the Democrats, they're just going far and far left. They're trying to bring MS-13 gangs back from El Salvador. I mean, you have to be so desperate for that to be your main point of contention with the president, you know, that you have to go to El Salvador to go and fight to bring someone who's deported. So
Mm.
it must be hard for the Democrats right now because they don't even have a leader who can unite the party. Their solution is only to go farther left,
Mm-hmm.
which was rejected by the Americans in the last election.
Mm-hmm.
But they seem to still be going that route. People like AOC, a leading party, people like what's this other guy's name?
Benny.
Sanders, Bernie Sanders. He's still as socialist as he can be, even though that was rejected in the person of Kamala Harris. He's still trying to go that route. But anyways, some people never learn.
Okay. Yeah, that was insightful. That was quite an interesting conversation. You gotta.
Yeah,
Now we kind of covered a lot. I think like
we
we
did. We did cover that. I
typically
don't even have
take
any
take a
comments.
short period of time to deal with a lot of stuff. We've been going
Yeah,
for approximately an hour, 10 minutes.
yeah,
If you
yeah, yeah.
take away the time we spend trying to share, yeah, maybe just about 60 minutes, which I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's a good time considering how much
And
we
there's a lot. We thought we were going to talk about the Pope today, but that's for another day, I think.
that's for another day. That's for sure. That's for another day.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, thank you everyone. I hope you guys did find this show live stream interesting and educative and informative because again that is that's the purpose for us doing this. I know entertainment is something that we all want to do, but
Yeah,
sometimes we need to get serious and talk serious business about things that impact us. Again, like they say, when two elephants are fighting,
you
it's the
got to.
grass that suffers. So we here in the West, China and the US have been fighting for about a month, and we are feeling the impact. And I would assure you that it doesn't matter where you are, Cameroon, Nigeria, Africa, wherever you are, you at some point you will feel the impact of this
You're
fight
gonna
if
feel
it
it,
keeps
yeah.
going on, right? So
Yeah.
we are all going to be impacted in one way or another by the war tariff war
Yeah.
between US and China. So I mean I would say that I am happy that we've been able to kind of resolve, at least we're taking steps to resolve this crisis,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me calling it a crisis, and that this conversation was worth having. We had a good number of people come in to listen and to watch. No one was willing to
No
come up
comment.
and share their views, and I
Right.
don't think we have
No,
any
that's fine.
messages. So we are going to, wish you guys a
Wonderful
wonderful
night.
night, a wonderful day, depending on where you are, and we will talk to you again in a couple of days. Share, like, and thumbs up, of course.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.